Hi everybody, my name is Michael and I'm going to be covering the physics concepts for circuits for resistors. So in this video specifically we're going to cover parallel circuits and provide an example and go over series circuits with an example. You can also see combination circuits with an example and an MCAT-like question for circuits for resistors in the following video. So what we're going to cover first is parallel circuits for resistors and how to solve for the equivalent resistance and tell the relationship between voltage and current for parallel circuits, and then calculate the current through the 5 ohm resistor for this problem here. To find the equivalent resistance, the formula is provided on your formula sheet, but I encourage you to memorize it for parallel circuits and for series circuits. So the formula is 1 over resistance equivalent is equal to 1 over R1 plus 1 over R2, and that can go on depending on how many resistors you have in parallel. So an alternative equation for that, which is a little bit nicer to solve for using a calculator or just solving in your head, is you can multiply R1 times R2 and divide that by the sum of R1 and R2. So if we want to find the equivalent resistance for this circuit specifically, I'm going to take the two resistances in parallel, which are the 5 ohm resistor and the 3 ohm resistor, and I'm going to add them together. So that will be 5 times 3 over 5 plus 3. So that will be 15 ohms over 8 ohms. And using a calculator, I know that the equivalent resistance will be 1.88 ohms. So now that we have the equivalent resistance of the parallel circuit, we can find the current through the 5 ohm resistor. If we want to find the voltage across the resistor, it's as easy as looking at what these parallel circuits, what the voltage is in parallel to. The overall voltage for this circuit is 10 volts, and because voltage remains the same between parallel circuits, I know that each of these resistors, the voltage running through there will be 10 volts. And the reason that parallel circuits have the same voltage is because both of these resistors have a direct path to the positive and negative terminals of the battery. So that's why, since it doesn't have to run through any other resistor, it won't be affected, so then therefore it will be the same. So now if we want to find the current through the 5 ohm resistor, I'm going to take the 5 ohm resistor and the voltage through that, which is 10 volts as we already identified, and use Ohm's law. So I equals V over R, voltage over resistance. So that will be 10 volts over 5 ohms, gives us 2 amps. And to show you that it's different currents between resistors in parallel, I can just quickly solve for the 3 ohm resistor as well. That would be 10 volts divided by the 3 ohms equals 3 1/3 amps. So now, as you can see, they have different currents, but the same voltage. So that's basically what you need to know for solving for parallel circuits for resistors. So now we're going to cover solving series circuits for resistors. So to find the equivalent resistance of a circuit in series, you simply have to add them up because the equation for equivalent resistance is R1 plus R2 and so forth, depending on how many resistors are in series. So for this problem, I'm going to just simply add 3 ohm resistor plus the 5 ohm resistor, and that will give me an equivalent resistance of 8 ohms. So now if we want to find the current through the resistors, I know for series circuits that current remains the same regardless of where you're at in the circuit. And so if current remains the same between both resistors, I can just solve for using the equivalent resistance and solving for the current from that using the 10 volt battery. So the Ohm's law equation for current would be I equals V over R once again. And so our voltage here is 10 volts. and I'm going to divide that by the equivalent resistance, and that is 8 ohms, and so that will give me a current of 1.25. So that means since current remains the same between resistors, the current running through both the 5 ohm resistor and the 3 ohm resistor is 1.25 amperes. So now if we want to find the voltage through the 5 ohm resistor, we know that that will be different from the voltage through the 3 ohm resistor. So to calculate voltage, I'm going to use the current, which I know stays the same, and the resistance of the resistor in question. So that voltage, the Ohm's law equation is V equals I times R. So current we know is 1.25. And if we're looking for the 5 ohm resistor, I plug in 5 ohms, and that's going to give me 6.25 volts for that resistor. So that's essentially what you need to know for a series circuit. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and leave them in the comments. And then if you're looking for a combination circuit with an example and an MCAT-like question, go ahead and watch the next video. Thank you and have a great rest of the day.